live.
Yeah, so in this episode, we've agreed that we're going to have a conversation about the Jevons Paradox. And I think it's something that we've both had on our minds for quite a while. I think that's fair to say. Maybe slightly different perspectives on it, but nevertheless, the fact that it's a paradox is something that has intrigued us and made us kind of wonder, like, what is the way through it or past it or around it?
Mm.
So for anyone listening, I'll give a quick kind of overview of the Jevons Paradox. It came from a guy called William Stanley Jevons in the 1800s in the Industrial Revolution in Britain. And essentially what it was that you had all of this kind of emerging industry powered by steam, and Britain had tons and tons of coal. And that seemed to be a great thing from an economic point of view. It was sort of abundant, and it was the energy that was fueling the Industrial Revolution. But they were using it so fast that some people started worrying. Some economists started worrying, like, well, what if we run out? And they basically, the economists sort of split into two camps. One camp was like, if we carry on at this rate, sounds kind of familiar, doesn't it? If we carry on at this rate, we're going to run out of coal, and then we're going to really be in a big pickle. And then the other camp was basically saying, nah, we've got loads of coal. Like, we've got abundant coal, and we keep discovering more coal. So don't worry about it. It's not a problem. Plus, those people who were saying, oh, we've got, some people were also saying that the steam engines are getting more and more efficient. They're like, it's a new technology. We keep iterating and improving. And so we'll just keep making the steam engines more efficient. And so that will solve, if there are worries about how much coal Britain has, the improvement in the efficiency of the steam engines will solve that problem. And there was basically one economist who kind of just said, no, I think you're all wrong. And that was William Stanley Jevons. And he wrote a book in 1865 called The Coal Question, in which he said, I'm going to quote, "It is a confusion of ideas to suppose that the economical use of fuel is equivalent to reduced consumption. The very contrary is the truth." And what he described was how he had observed that when James Watt's steam engine was introduced, James Watt's steam engine was significantly more efficient than previous steam engine designs. And he had noticed that instead of reducing coal consumption, it had paradoxically significantly increased Britain's coal consumption. And so the paradox is that when you make a technology more energy efficient, and it's specifically about energy here, when you make it more energy efficient, the machine itself uses less energy, and that's a good thing. It's a good thing in terms of like the person using it. So if I'm the owner of the machine, that's great. I use less fuel. It costs me less money, and so on. But in terms of the total energy consumption of society, when you add it all up, you actually get a net increase in energy consumption. And he suggested that the reasons for this are basically that, one, when you make the technology more energy efficient, you make it effectively cheaper to use, and therefore you can start applying it to lower value tasks that you would never have previously used it for. So when a technology is new, it's generally very expensive to run. So you look at like, what are the high value things that we could apply it to? And then as it gets more efficient, it becomes cheaper to operate. And then you start applying it to more kind of trivial, low value things that in the past you wouldn't have bothered applying this high-tech machine to. So you end up with basically a lot more steam, even though each individual steam engine is more efficient, you end up with a lot more steam engines being run a lot more of the time for a lot more things. And hence you have a net increase in energy consumption. Also creates a rebound effect. And I think it's probably worth acknowledging that the Jevons Paradox is kind of, there's a broader concept of the rebound effect. And the Jevons Paradox is kind of one like subset that Jevons kind of observed. But yeah, so you also get a broader rebound effect that's beyond energy, in the sense that because the technology of production has become more efficient, you can now produce lower cost goods. So therefore normal people can afford to buy more things. And therefore there's an economic benefit, but there's also an environmental cost to that, because now there's like increased consumption of energy and stuff. So that's basically, in a nutshell, that's the Jevons Paradox. And I know kind of in our work in digital technology, we've both kind of looked at it from different ways and thought, "Ooh, how does this apply? Does it apply? If so, how do we get around it?" But I think we're both more broadly also interested in just how does it apply to society as a whole. Yeah, I know you got some thoughts on it.
Well, I first just wanted to, I think, because I find when people use the terms Jevons Paradox, oftentimes conflating it with the rebound effect. And the way I describe the rebound effect, well, the way I would describe it is the rebound effect is if let's say you make your something like, let's keep it to software, some software 20% more efficient. Efficient to what? Let's pin that for a second. But 20% more efficient, maybe like that will increase its usage by 5%. So really the rebound effect is like, well, actually there's this 20% efficiency, but then you lose some of the gains you might get from that efficiency because your product is just used more. And the way I've at least learned Jevons Paradox is Jevons Paradox is when that's basically 100% or 110%.
Yeah.
So the more efficient you make something, like let's say you make something 100% cheaper. 100% cheaper? Is that a thing? No, that means it's free. Let's say you make something like 50. Did you see the Trump thing recently? He's going to like reduce prices by 5,000%. And I was like, what?
That's a vote winner, that one.
But as a vote winner, I'm going to reduce drugs to 5,000%. I was going to say, so like Jevons Paradox is like, let's say you make something like 50% cheaper, but then people use it 75% more. So it's like, it's just not helping. And so the way I've seen it used in the sustainability movement, I think Chris Adams, I don't know if he coined this term, but I've heard it first from him, which was, he called it Jevons Paralysis, which is, when you're exploring anytime you're talking about any kind of efficiency measures, someone just describe it's like an Uno reverse card, like you're playing a debate game, and you're like, oh, we need to talk about efficiency gains. Then they're like, Jevons Paradox, got you. I won, and you're like, well, hang on, wait a second. It's not like it's not such a given. Like, yes, I mean, from a rebound effect. So what? Rebound effect means some of the efficiency gains you made are eroded. Doesn't mean that you shouldn't make the efficiency gains. So I think for me, rebound effect isn't particularly an important issue. It's useful to know so you can really evaluate and measure things correctly and not kind of overestimate the impact of things. But Jevons Paradox is a really interesting and gnarly question, which is when you does it matter that you're making any efficiency gains? Because if the consumption doesn't change at all, from a carbon emissions perspective, if the emissions don't change at all, who cares that you made some efficiency gains? And the worst case is you making efficiency gains actually makes more, keeping it to carbon emissions, makes more carbon emissions going into the atmosphere, in which case you're like, oh, I didn't mean that to happen. So that's really interesting. And again, with the AI world, it's like really fascinating because like it is a really hard problem, because, why is there suddenly a lot of interest in, green software in the AI ecosystem? It's not because they generally want to reduce the emissions of AI. It's that, well, if you make it more efficient, I can sell more of it. And, the overall impact is there's like, you could argue there's almost no impact at all in terms of total emissions by making AI any more efficient. It doesn't matter, because the more efficient you make it, they just still max out everything, and they're still maxing
That's
it
it.
all
They're
out.
not planning to downscale data centers once they make it more efficient. They're just planning to sell more of it, exactly as you say.
That's a really hard place for my brain to be, because I don't really too sure what to say. I still have to talk about, I still believe it. I don't have a better path right now. I still believe like making it more efficient. Just, we have to like think about it from that perspective. But then you really have to think about it like, so then I really started researching a while ago, because I was just so tired of people dropping the Jevons Paradox Uno card at me. In any time I talked about efficiency, I just dove into Jevons Paradox, and I was like, well, what the hell is going on? And what was interesting, and I don't know what your research has uncovered here, there's actually not been many examples of Jevons Paradox itself being discovered. There's lots of examples of rebound effect, which is very much real. But in terms of you making something more efficient to the point at which it nullifies your efficiency and actually makes more emissions go out in the world. Very few examples. It's very hard from a research perspective to also say that it happened because you made it more efficient. I think that is kind of a very interesting angle. Like, you can always say, everybody's always tries to like lay claim to something happening because of something they did, but it's not always the case. And I think, and then when you also look at it, there's actually societal benefits many times. When you look at the Jevons Paradox, forget about the rebrand, but in terms of the examples of Jevons Paradox, the ones that I found always have massive societal benefits that is associated with it. And maybe I'll start off with like the coal one, because you started off with the coal one, the coal example. Let me read out some quotes from a book called it's called Dissolving Illusions. I'll let people figure out what that's about. But let me get to the point on children. Yeah. So this is a quote from Ellison Jack, who's an 11-year-old girl in the 1840s, and her job was a coal bearer. She's 11 years old. So my task is 4 or 5 tubs. Each tub holds 4.5 hundredweight, which is 112 pounds. So each tub holds 112 pounds. I fill 5 tubs in 20 journeys. I'm very glad when my task is wrought, as it sore fatigues. So an 11-year-old girl, the job as a coal bearer in the 1840s. This is, steam engines have started to come into force, but hadn't really evolved kind of the coal mining industry. 20 journeys got her filled 112 pounds. So she's a coal bearer. She's the one dragging the coal from the mine up out of the mine. During the 1800s and 1900s, life for many children in the United States and England was that of long and brutal hours of hard labor and property. Their lives were not filled with joy and laughter, but often with suffering and crushing misery. Many machines did not need adult strength to operate, so children could be hired more inexpensively than adults. When the demands of the trade were active, they were often arranged in 2 shifts, each shift working 12 hours, one in the day and another at night. So it was a common saying in the north of the England that their beds never get cold. One set climbing into bed as the other got out. Children began their life in the coal mines at 5, 6, or 7 years of age. Girls and women worked like boys and men. They were less than half clothed and worked alongside men who were stark naked. It was bloody hot in the mines. You didn't wear any clothes, right? Due to improved machinery, boys were principally employed as coal breakers. So the coal comes out, but it's not always just coal. It's kind of mixed in with other things like slate. So you're trying to extract it all out. So they're picking out slate from the coal as it was dumped into mine cars. And the breakers where the coal was dried, the coal dust was so dense that even on bright days, light would not penetrate. So it's like a really dusty, it's all going into your lungs, right? In the coal breakers, little boys are sometimes ground in large crushers by accident, ground up, that break the coal, caught in the wheels or other machinery. You've ever seen images and videos of kind of what life was like, even with machinery in the 1800s? You could easily get your hand caught and ripped off in a lot of this stuff. It was just buried in streams of coals. And this was their life. Yeah. This was the life of children inside the coal mines. And so then when we talk about kind of the steam engine, and the steam engine is kind of related to that steam engine and all this, making mining more efficient, right? So it made mining more efficient. So as well as kind of making mining more efficient, it just completely transformed the lives of people, of children. Where have we got it all here? So yeah, so the British coal production surged from 5.2 million tons in 1750 to 62.5 million tons by 1850, reached 292 million tons by 1913s, and Jevons calculated this represented a 3.5 annual growth rate. That's what he was saying is too fast. But this increased consumption, rather than representing waste, just funded this massive transformation of societal change. in the UK. It funded the Mines and Collieries Act of 1842, which prohibited children under the age of 10 from working underground and addressing conditions where children as young as 5 had labored like 12 to 16 hours. 5, my God, my son's 6. I just can't. This is like...
Yeah, it's unthinkable.
Labor 12 to 16 hours daily is unthinkable, yeah. And they were paid wages 80% lower than adults. So paid like nothing. Children paid nothing. 1842, children had comprised 25% of all mining workers. So this is not the odd bunch of people. This is like serious stuff. And the wealth generated by the more efficient generation and extraction of coal and the steam engines, basically the power you could get from the coal from steam engine, the wealth generated from that, enabled the Elementary Education Act of 1870, establishing Britain's first national education system. You know, between 1817 and 1902, 5,700 board schools were created, 2.6 million children were educated. I mean, it's just that example alone. Like when I researched that, it was shocking to me because I was like, okay, I'd heard about Jevons Paradox so many times. The Uno card be landed to me. I've heard about the coal example so many times in these debates, and at no point had anybody said, oh, actually, but as well as the increased carbon emissions, we seem to have completely altered the lives of millions of children for the benefit of all of them. And if you ask me, I'm like, okay, if you would give me those options, I would say I think that was the right choice.
Yeah, and you're right. Yeah. It's nearly always. It's interesting that because Jevons was an economist and he wasn't an environmentalist. He was literally just looking at it from the perspective of like, we're going to run out of coal. What are we going to do about it? But it's become a thing that is kind of, I mean, it's not talked about that often, but if it is talked about, it's nearly always talked about in the environmental context. And when you actually look at the bigger picture, as you've just highlighted, it actually really represents a tension between sort of social progress and environmental progress, because it's like as you move one way, you're basically using energy to make life better for people. But as you use more energy to make life better for people, there's an environmental toll, both in terms of the energy consumption, if it's fossil fuels, for example, perhaps even other sources of fuel, as well as the fact that there's an environmental impact of the increased consumption of goods and so on. So you have this tension that is really about energy, of like using more. And do we want to use more energy? Because using more energy can really like lift people out of poverty and make like people's lives easier and allow us to do things that we just couldn't do with our very limited human effort. Like the amount of energy that a human can output, physical energy that we can output as workers, is pathetically small. Like even a really, if we didn't have like any kind of other ability, if you're just like a manual laborer with no power tools, the actual amount of work that we can do is really, really small. And like a Tour de France cyclist, for example, I'm going off on a bit of a track, but it's relevant. Tour de France cyclists are often considered to be like the fittest athletes in the world in terms of what they can do, like human energy output sustained over a long period of time. Like they're putting out like only a few hundred watts. Like it's, I mean, it's nothing, it's nothing. Like my blender uses like significantly more than that. My kettle uses significantly more than that. I mean, they can barely power my laptop. If you had a 100% energy conversion, like if you put them on a turbine and just got them to ride like all day with a generator attached to them with 100% conversion efficiency, they would, they'd struggle to power this podcast, not including the data centers, just you and me on our laptops with our microphones and stuff.
Yeah.
So energy allows us to massively lift ourselves out of poverty. Like literally not just poverty today when we think of sort of people living in a modern society below the poverty line, but if you track back in history, before we had these ways of harnessing energy through like steam engines and power generators and what have you, people's lives were grim because they literally had to toil to do like in with nothing. It would be like if you and me, if we had a permanent power cut, and it'd be like, right, like everything I have to do, I've got to physically do it myself. I've got to, like, I've got to build infrastructure. I've got to, build myself a house, maintain my house. I've got to grow food,
drill a hole in a wall.
Exactly. I know. When I was a kid, my dad still had the old like hand drill. I mean,
Yeah, we'd had,
like it's hard work. It's hard work, and it's very, very slow progress to do anything. And even then, like, how does that hand drill exist? Like, even the hand drill was made by machines that were powered by external energy. If you had to make a hand drill using no external energy sources, like you couldn't do it because you couldn't make the steel. Well, maybe you could. If you could. I don't know. If you could find a way of building a fire that burned hot enough, maybe you could do it. But then you're getting into technology.
Yeah,
you've developed a technology.
You've got to. Yeah. Well, they layer on top of each other. Like we would never, if civilization destroyed, you wouldn't be able to go to silicon wafer chips straight away. You'd have to slowly build up a bunch of technologies to enable another bunch of technologies. Yeah.
So I mean, in a sense, what I'm agreeing with you and just highlighting that this is a tension between social progress and environmental progress that isn't really discussed, and in a way, maybe that's the real paradox.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, I think it's interesting because when I look at the other examples, there seems to be like this thing which isn't addressed. Even in the rebound effect case studies, it's like it's always presented like when you hear that something is more efficient, you run out and use it more because you heard it's more efficient. It's like you're, I might hear, okay, my LED light bulb is more efficient. Am I just going to just use it more because it's more efficient? It's like the reason for the use is linked solely to the increased efficiency. Whereas if you look at the examples of Jevons Paradox and other ones, there is this demand that exists irrespective of the efficiency aspects of it. A huge unmet demand for something, so that when you make an efficiency improvement, the demand is actually so much higher than the supply right now. That it's so much unbelievably higher that any efficiency improvement is actually just going to bubble it up high. It's just going to meet the demand.
Exactly.
And I suppose that's what kind of Jevons, because he wasn't the creator of the supply-demand curve. Not that I believe in the supply-demand curve, but he was one of the founders, people who founded some of the work that led into that. But like, if you look at like, there's another example which I think is really interesting, which is like Asian, like irrigation, like improvements in irrigation technology, increased more food production in India. So this is like a 2024 study of 404 farmers in India. 85% increased their cropped area after adoption of micro irrigation. And I've had the green revolution. Here's the green revolution. Clearest example of like Jevons paradox at scale. India's wheat yields increased from 0.63 to 1.37 megagrams per hectare between 1965 and 1992. And rice yields rose from 2 to 6 tons per hectare. It was due to more efficiency regarding irrigation technology, like got better. And it's a problem. There's a huge amount of fresh water that's being used now in irrigation in India also. However, a lot of it's significant. 2022, a 2020 study from the Journal of Health Economics found that also significantly reduced infant mortality at the same time. Significantly reduced infant mortality. And it's also just another example of Jevons Paradox. And it's a very odd example of Jevons Paradox, because it's like, if we make people, if we give starving people, if we make it easier for starving people to have food, they'll just eat more food. And you're like, yes, yeah, yeah, exactly. That's the what? Yeah, that's the point. You want to make them like have more food. So it's like just another example. Like, keep on whenever I hit these Jevons Paradox examples, I'm like, okay, yeah, increased efficiency, created more of the product, and the more people consume the product, and more water. In this example, lots of water. There was less a question of wheat. It was more a question of we made water irrigation more efficient, and unfortunately, rather than reduce the amount of water being sucked from the water table, increase the amount of water being sucked from the water table because people were hungry and they wanted food. So there's like that example as well. Both of these examples have this societal benefit that is massive, huge. I'm hungry. I don't want to work in a mine. It's kind of like it's worth it from that perspective. So in the Jevons, and I suppose where the boundary lies between where this has a societal benefit is there seems to be just this massive need that's unmet. Yeah. And like trusting the fact that that need isn't from I suppose like it's not like I want to watch a lot of dance videos and I just need to watch a lot of dance videos. I watch a lot of dance videos for some reason. YouTube. I don't it's not my choice. The algorithm has told me I like dance videos. But it's not driven from that. It's the Jevons Paradox examples are typically like I'm going to die. Something it's always driven far more. The unmet need is so much more visceral and so much more human and so much more based around real human suffering that it just seems to be the link there somehow.
Well, it seems as if the illusion is that the limiting factor is efficiency. The limiting factor is efficiency. But
from consumption, the limiting factor is efficiency.
But actually, that's limiting our energy consumption, but it's also limiting our ability to meet our needs. So what you're saying is like, okay, well, let's lift the limit so we can meet more needs, but then we'll end up consuming more energy. And in some ways, that isn't a problem. It's only a problem for two reasons. One, if that can't be sustained. So it's like the literal use of the term sustainable. It's like, are those people in India going to get a benefit now, but then in like 10, 20 years time, whenever, going to be in even deeper poverty because the water table's depleted? And then how do you solve that? And then the other potential environmental issue is, are you then consuming, I mean, it's kind of a similar thing, but are you then consuming so much in terms of like material goods and all of the processes that go with that in terms of like mining and transportation and so on, that you then cause other social and environmental problems through doing that. So it's a sort of a short-term versus long-term trade-off. And if you could crack it, you'd say, well, no, what you'd want is to say, well, look, we're going to lift that limit because we want people to have better lives, particularly when it's a case of overcoming like the hardships of poverty, both in terms of like food supply as well as like eliminating disease and these sorts of things. But we need to find a way of somehow being able to do that long term. And in some ways, like humanity has managed to do that by then like inventing the next thing, and then inventing the next thing, and then the next thing. And I think that's why you see like a lot of tech optimism is sort of based on that idea that like, well, we'll figure it out because we'll just invent the next thing and that'll solve it. We don't know what it is yet, but we'll invent it, don't worry. And then the kind of the environmental fear is the kind of the other side of that, which is saying, but is this a house of cards that eventually like there won't be the next thing or the next thing won't work because the planet is fundamentally finite. So we're like the technology that seems to be giving us more abundance is actually just squeezing the sponge harder. And eventually we'll like, it'll be actually be,
I love that.
Be dry.
I love that visual. Yeah.
And I think the truth is probably a bit of both, as in like that people will keep inventing new technologies that help overcome these limiting factors and keep improving things. But at the same time, some of them are just kind of rinsing the earth to its limits of what it's capable of giving us. And then you are in this like real dilemma because you don't want to deny, exactly as you're saying, you don't want to deny people the opportunity now to overcome real suffering, because you can see on the horizon that they're like, oh, that this is going to be a problem down the line. I can see why you'd want to do it on a kind of on a more superficial level. When I say more superficial level, I don't mean superficial in terms of quantities, I mean in terms of need. So I can see why, from a like an environmentalist point of view, probably in a Western country, probably middle class, and seeing that a lot of the environmental destruction in the world is actually caused by things that are not lifting people out of poverty. Then, do you know what I mean? It's like giving those people in India more food is not a primary driver of ecological crises.
Yeah.
Whereas
Yeah. Me watching
you
dance
watching
videos,
dance videos,
on
that's
loop
him.
on it's not. I'm not helping.
Yeah, exactly that. And but then the question is, like, how do we, like, what is the limiting factor? Because, like, we're not, exactly as you're saying, you're not watching dance videos because somebody made it energy efficient to watch dance videos. You're watching dance videos for other reasons. You might care to share some of those.
I'm not sure, to be honest. The algorithm told me I
Maybe
like dance
you've
videos,
just been
and that's it.
hypnotized by an algorithm.
Yeah, I don't know.
But maybe that is kind of the problem, that it's actually like there are these false drivers of consumption in society that are kind of decoupled from need. So it's not like, oh, I really need to watch more dance videos. It's that there's a company that needs to make more money, and they make money by having you spend more time on their platforms. So they design algorithms that are more addictive, just to use the dance video example as one. And so, you know, we're in this world where we talked about before about advertising and so on, that we're bombarded with messages and increasingly with kind of psychological manipulation through digital technology to make us want to consume, whether it's consume digital services or consume physical products more. And actually, that's not the Jevons Paradox. That's marketing, and
that's the other side of the
and,
equation.
Yeah, it's the artificial
Yeah.
drivers of consumption.
Well, I think it's because I remember writing about. I wrote an article about this a while ago, and I was equating. You know, I've forgotten exactly what I said, but I was equating our use of software to addiction. You know, and what is addiction other than a consumption, an engineered consumption in another human being that is not something they need, not even really something they particularly want, but it's been engineered. You know, a lot of effort. You know, I think maybe we were talking about it the other day. There's a lot of effort that goes into, if you are binge watching videos or on YouTube, or binge eating food, or taking cocaine or whatever, like these drugs, like you are the goal for everybody, be it through a legalized mechanism or for whatever reason an illegal mechanism, is just trying to make you addicted to something. So we're addicted to software. We're addicted to food that we don't particularly need or is particularly unhealthy. You know, the amount of sugar you put in. Sugar is like, how can we resist sugar? Like millions of years of evolution. Like we're supposed to, like, in 50 years figure out, you know, somehow resist this unbelievable urge. And so when you know, the way like software is, I remember reading a book years ago when I was just years ago, called the Gamification by Design, and when the gamification started coming out in terms of how do you make people use your software more, and it was very much like talking about, you know, the way games function, where if you play a game, there's usually a bunch of quick rewards, one after the other, and then there's a period which turns into the grind. Where you got to grind your way through the game, so you got to grind to get each reward. The timing of those are very formulaic because they're designed around a dripping dopamine from your head,
Right.
enough without and not leaving too much of a gap between the dopamine drips, so you move off and do something else. And so basically, all that a game is a drug delivery device, but it's very you're self-delivering the drugs. All that food is, all that food, and all that gamification stuff has been adopted in the software that we use as well these days. It's designed around that. The food is designed around that. It's all designed around making you addicted to a lot of things. So I suppose there's consumption and I think a vast amount of consumption is driven through addiction to new technology, through advertising. Why do I need an iPhone 93?
It's right.
When my current thing is, I don't know. By the time we die, it probably will be iPhone 93, you know? But like, why do we need 93 iPhones? I don't know. But it's all, there's consumption driven through addiction. There's consumption driven through need.
Yeah.
I suppose maybe I'll probably classify as 3 areas: as consumption driven through need, consumption driven through pure want, consumption driven through addiction. And I don't think we all realize how much of our consumption is driven through engineered addiction.
Yeah.
The amount of engineering that goes behind a Dorito crisp is unreal. The crisp. How can you resist a Dorito crisp? If there's Doritos at home, they're getting eaten. My only way of resisting is making sure we do not buy anything related to this, and it's
such a huge profit motive. If you think about it, like even incrementally, if you could increase the addictivity of Doritos by 1%, how many more Doritos would be sold worldwide? It's vast in terms of the profit potential of that addictive mechanism.
Yeah,
but yeah, no, I think
as an ex,
I think you're right about those 3 categories.
I was going to say very well like that. As an ex-smoker,
right? Yeah, go on.
As an ex-smoker who's also recently quit smoking again successfully, it always amazed me that there are legalized addictions and illegalized addictions, and it never made sense to me. It's not like heroin is somehow more dangerous than all this other. There's a really great study which showed the impact of different drugs.
Yeah. This was I know the one you mean. David Nutt.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, I can't remember. Was it smoking number one? I can't remember what was number one. It was fascinating. The psychedelics were like right at the other end of this spectrum. But I'll stop talking. I interrupted you. I'll stop talking. I just wanted to add that one part.
No. I was just going to say those 3 categories that you described, I think are spot on in terms of like there is genuine need. If you talk, like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, there are genuine things we need just to get to a point where like life is okay. Like we're getting by and we're not having to scrabble every day just for our kind of basic physical needs like food, water, shelter, safety, etc. And then there's wants, and then there's I think the difference between wants and addictions, because obviously there is an overlap between those 2 things, because we can get addicted to things not in nature. I mean, nothing really in nature is that addictive, I don't think. Anyway, maybe it is. Someone can write in and tell me give me an example. I mean, without humans doing something to it.
Yeah.
I mean, like poppy seeds can be very addictive, but you've got to do something to them first. So, yeah, no, there are examples. I mean, tobacco is natural, but natural tobacco has been bred to be more addictive, right? Is the higher nicotine content?
No, yeah, probably, yeah.
Like indigenous sort of ancient strains apparently had very low nicotine content. So you've got, if we take the needs out of the question, you've got these wants and these addictions. And I think wants is kind of a personal thing where actually that's like our own struggle to learn basically how to find happiness in and within ourselves rather than looking for it outside of ourselves in material things. And there's definitely like a big element of that, which even if you took all of the kind of capitalist mechanisms away, there's always going to be some part of people who thinks, well, maybe my life would be better if I just had, right, that. It's like something more than I have now, whatever that might be. And that's kind of just part of the human struggle and the human journey to kind of figure out like, well, how do I find my way to happiness and contentment and whatever you want to call it. And then there's the engineered consumption, which is essentially mechanisms of addiction combined with mechanisms of emotional manipulation to make you feel like you're not enough. You're not successful, you're not loved, you're not, you can't be happy unless you have like this next thing. Those 2 things, the addiction and the emotional manipulation kind of like, they fit together as part of a package. And I reckon the majority of unnecessary consumption probably fits into that category. I reckon if you stripped it all away and you said, look, no one's going to do any of that. No one's going to do any kind of manipulative marketing. No one's going to design products in a way that makes them like intentionally addictive. We're just going to do everything kind of in a pure way. And some people will naturally just feel like they need more stuff than other people. But I think global consumption of energy, of physical goods would plummet. But we're stuck in this economic system where we need economic growth. Like you got to have GDP's got to go up next year. Otherwise somehow that is like the end of the world. Everything will collapse. That number on the chart has got to be a little bit higher than it was last year.
Well, because GDP is linked solely to consumption because it's linked to solely what can be bought or sold. It has no other value. There's basically, because governments have set this metric arbitrarily, set this metric of GDP, and the only way to increase GDP is to get people to buy and sell more things in your country. Unless they're buying and selling more things because they need to or they want to, the only other way you can do it is to actually encourage the addiction and encourage kind of the addiction of, in fact, you want your country to go into debt. You want your people in your country to go into debt so they will buy more things that they'll be addicted to, because that will artificially inflate your GDP. I just think it's just everybody in the sustainability community who just, I find a very frustrating argument when people say they just drop it into a discussion that you're trying to have like a very complicated, nuanced statement around how we navigate a path, and someone goes, we just need to reduce consumption.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, yeah, thanks, buddy. So now I can't. Now, if you try and then everything that you're saying sounds like you're somebody who supports increased consumption when you're really just trying to find a nuanced path where you actually could solve it. But it's almost like as we were talking, I don't know if I told you about this story, but I remember I was speaking at a conference in America, in Las Vegas. I'd never been to Las Vegas before, but I stayed at a hotel, and it was like a hotel like in Las Vegas on the Strip. And it was the weirdest experience of my entire life. I've stayed in a lot of hotels, but I've never stayed in a hotel like this. Because to go into my room, I had to go into all of these people. It was all slot machines, all these people playing slot machines. And then in this elevator and upstairs, and I couldn't sleep one night, and I came down in the middle of the night, and it was just full of people who were on the slot machines. And I got this image in my head I couldn't get rid of, which was I imagined the whole place as a decrepit crack den. And I was just imagining all these people that are on the slot machines are actually just leaning up against them with like needles in their arms.
Yeah.
And I was seeing the whole place as just people who, I didn't see it as a place where people are just having fun. I saw it as a place where people were just addicted to this. But imagine if I just turned around in there one day and I said, "Hey, everybody, I've got the solution. We just need to stop gambling. I've got it. I figured it out. We just need to stop gambling. We figured it out." Imagine how it's just like we can't just have, whenever time anybody has that conversation, we just need to reduce consumption. You're then basically arguing against this massive engine of addiction, which every company, everything is engineered to make humans addicted to something so that they can extract money from them. And then so again, it's like, even when I say is it really fair for even you to say, even to an individual in the world, hey, you just need to stop consuming, when really what you're saying to that person is you need to resist.
Yeah.
You need to find some way to resist this unbelievable onslaught on your senses, which is forcing you to consume. And your failure to resist that is the problem. And I don't think that's a fair statement.
No, because essentially what you're doing is saying to people who are addicted, but they're not just addicted. I mean, if I'm being honest, I think anyone who's addicted to anything, there is a reason behind it. Like, they didn't just decide one day to get addicted to something like that. It was driven by some emotional need or some external factor. And I think in many, many cases, the external factor, in terms of like the push of and systems upon them as in their life, has led them there, because that's what it was trying to push them into a corner, and they ended up in the corner. And then you're saying to them, why are you in the corner? What are you doing? And it's like the floor is like the floor is like a moving conveyor belt that moves into the corner, and you're just like just get out the corner. And
Why are you
every time they try and
just get out of the
walk
corner?
this
Yeah.
way, they just keep moving back again. So yeah, I think this addiction thing is a massive thing. Vanessa and I actually, bizarrely, very out of character, went to Las Vegas last year, and
Oh, did
yeah,
you?
and I found that I kind of wanted to go because I mean, there was a reason to go anyway, which was just because it was kind of the gateway to get into Arizona, to see more wholesome things. I also I just wanted to see with my own eyes, like, this bizarre,
Yeah.
crazy place. Similar to you, like, we stayed in this hotel and it just felt really sad. There were just all these people, and I just felt really sad. Like, and you know, like, 'cause as you say, like, you stand in the lift, and you can kind of tell there's people who are just there on holiday having a jolly, and then there's people who are like,
Yeah.
they're there and they look kind of like empty shells of people, and they're probably just going there because they're addicted and they're losing loads of money. And the whole place, just Vanessa and I both sort of felt like it's almost like the final destination. Like, if you want to know where society is heading, go to Las Vegas.
Yeah.
It's like they've modeled it for us to show us what it will look like when we get there.
Yeah.
And then, as you say, like, there's probably a back room somewhere in that casino where they're all like, you know, there's the crack den somewhere that's like not on public show, that like that's the real final destination.
Well, I did on my last day. I had like a big wait to get to the airport. So I thought, you know what? Just I was there for a conference. I didn't really have time to play around. I thought, you know, I'll give it a go. And I think I took like $20, and within like 10 minutes, I had $300.
Wow.
And it was crazy. I was like, I didn't really know what I was doing. I was just like pressing buttons until I got $300. And I was like texting my friends going, what should I do? And they would like, cash out, just cash out. And I was like, no, I'll let it ride.
Did
Keep
you?
on going. And I lost. Yeah, I did. And I got down to 200. I was like, I'm going to cash out now. So I cashed out, but I got it. Like, I fully got it. Come on. It was the thrill. It was like the enjoyment, the surprise. Like, what's going to happen when I press it? I get it. It's like, it is addictive. It's fun.
It's
designed
to
be
make
fun.
you
It's
feel this
engineered
sense
for me
of
to do
like
that.
possibility.
Yeah.
I'm
Possibility.
on a roll, you know, and you know it's rigged.
I'm on a roll.
But part of you,
yeah, because they're making money out of it.
can't connect with the fact that you know it's like your rational part of you knows it's rigged, but there are like powerful emotional systems within you that it's tapping into that are like, oh, no, I'm going to win. I'm going big.
Yeah. Maybe if I crack this nut, it's going to be a juicy one inside. You know, it's like it's digging into some ancient, you know, trigger of risk reward. Yeah, but I think it's just that's So from a I think that yes, the whole thing, there is this unmet need. If we go back to Jevons, there's this unmet need of desire and consumption, and so that's what triggers the rebound of the Jevons Paradox. If that makes it, that's the true reason for it, not the fact that something became more efficient and that reduced the cost, which is like, I think when you dig into what Jevons and his whole idea around like utility and how people, like why people were making decisions, it doesn't hold water in today's, well, none of the neoclassical economic stuff holds water really and I think so. Then there's this, just the problem is the addiction, and no one's really looking. I don't think anybody. I've never heard anybody in the sustainability space talk about it from this side of the perspective. It just I feel, I don't know if maybe I'm just not involved in the conversations enough. It does feel like it's just left at, we just need to resolve the consumption problem, and that problem is either on individuals or on companies. But it's almost like, it's, again, I suppose it's all systemic. There's a systemic problem. I don't know what is causing this.
It is systemic, and to give another perspective on the systemic aspect, you could, let's say we introduced that angle of addiction and so on into, and unmet needs and wants, into the conversation about the Jevons Paradox and kind of spiraling consumption of energy and resources, then a lot of people will then point fingers at the companies saying, oh, but they're making us all addicted and they're evil and that's the problem. So we need to like stop that.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that's not true to some extent, but I think that is also an oversimplification because like as a business owner myself, I know that I'm not trying to design things to make them addictive for other people intentionally, but I do feel a pressure in society of the fact that I have to make ends meet. Once you're in that, basically everyone individually is in a position where it's like, I need to earn money. So I need to either get a job or I need to do something to earn money, like freelance or start a business or something. Unless you inherited or loads of money or won the lottery, you're basically in that position. You then go into the position of like, okay, I'll start a company and try and do it that way. You want it to just be like, nice, let's just do some cool projects and, people will pay us some money for it and it'll all be great. And that is fine. But then the problem is that the problem is basically inflation. Like every year, everything gets more expensive. And because everything gets more expensive, not only do your like kind of your like fixed overheads for office space and energy and hardware and these sorts of things, those costs go up, but people want higher salaries because their cost of living has also gone up, so the company then has to make more money, and then so you're in this like spiral where you can't just be like it's okay, we like basically just do what we did last year, it'll be fine. It's like, no, every year it's like that's that sponge analogy again. Like the sponge is like, but this time it's not the earth that's the sponge, it's you. Like you're just being squeezed a little bit harder by the economic system.
But you're also not you are in an environment where you have competition.
Exactly.
And your competition is changing and your competition is forcing you to change.
Yeah. And some of those people will be prepared to do things that maybe you would ideally not be prepared to do. But then they do it. And that means that they can deliver a similar thing for less money. And then you're in a situation where it's like, you might say, well, this is all very nice that we said we're not going to do that thing because we thought that's not like the best way or the nicest way or whatever it is. Because you think they're sort of cutting corners and it's not, there's whatever it might be. But once they've done it, you only need one to go first. And it creates this domino effect where then like, oh, one's gone and then they're getting competitive advantage and like customers are going there now, because they're feeling the squeeze that they're short of money. So they're like, well, these people are offering the same thing for less or more for the same, whatever.
Yeah.
So once one's gone, a few more go, and then it's just a hierarchy. And then generally you'll find that, people like me are near the end of the chain, like resisting. But ultimately it's like, but you can't resist forever because you'll just go out of business. Like you have to kind of, I mean, it depends what it is. If there's no ethical consideration, it's like, yeah, let's just do it. It's more efficient. That's better for the customer. We want to give them the best and we don't want to waste their money. But if it's something that you feel like I'm not quite sure, then you hold out as long as you can. But then if the alternative is going out of business, you've got no choice. There is this systemic like squeezing of all people and all companies. And it's easy to point at like Amazon or, I don't know, whoever. Let's just say Amazon, and as like examples of like just ruthless capitalism, just like cutting every corner in order to like sell you more stuff. And they're probably like the ones that tend to go first each time. But even they are human beings who are in this system where they sort of need to, because then they're reporting to shareholders. Like I'm a small business owner, I'm not reporting to shareholders, but once you get to a certain scale and you floated on the stock market, and there's a whole debate around whether like the pros and cons of that. But once you've done it, then they expect like returns and they expect growth every year. And the inflation you can't get away from. Like you've got to like, things are going to get more expensive every year. So you got to find a way of solving it. And so you end up with this sort of a race to the bottom in a way where instead of being like, how do we improve quality constantly? It becomes about how do we save costs.
Well, it's linked to also, I think again, it's linked to what you're saying about like inflation and growth. I think your argument, if I'm summarizing your argument, it's that the desire for for growth, which really is GDP growth, puts in place conditions where organizations and companies have to increase consumption, and for whatever reason, and then a number of organizations will do things which I would argue is addiction. I mean, if you look at Amazon's example, like their innovation of next day delivery, right? What do they tap into? My addiction.
Yeah.
There's
definitely
like, I don't know, do I really need that? I didn't really need
effect
that
with Amazon.
There's
like,
a
I can get it really soon.
tomorrow, right? It's like there's like something there. Like, why am I addicted to the value of my own time? But that whole thing is like what your argument I think you're making is that whole thing is this kind of circle, because then that growth increases inflation, which then increases the desire for consumption. So if we lived in a world, and essentially, because when you go back to like religion, like if you go back to I think Islam, and I think all Abrahamic faiths, I know it from Islam, but I don't think Muhammad invented it. I'm pretty sure it was a common across all of them. But usury, like you're not allowed to make interest on money. You're not allowed to like have growth in that way. Everything is kind of it's a much more like if you are going to make money, it's through the addition of value. And oh god, the mechanisms people go around these days as to how like Islamic funds is
like following the letter and not the spirit of the law kind of thing.
Yeah. But like so it's from like a religious and like a historical, arguably spiritual context, it's been known that this kind of like this hunt for growth, from that perspective at least, is negative. But we've just ignored it. And if we lived in a society where I don't know how it's so hard right now to even imagine what a society would look like without growth. I'm struggling even in my head to imagine what that would be. Why would we be motivated to do anything if there wasn't? I don't understand. It's so alien to me.
Yeah, I think in a way it's like we maybe need to be careful even about the use of the word growth, because I think it disguises what we're really doing. Because growth can be a wonderful thing. Like inner growth is a great thing, and like the growth of like plants and forests.
Growth in what? Growth.
Yeah.
Is health. Growth in health is wonderful.
Growth.
Yeah.
But growth of GDP is a kind of a magical, like it's not really a real tangible thing. It is just a made up metric. And as you're saying, it's kind of underpinned by this monetary system that a small number of people profit handsomely from, but because it's all based on debt and interest, it requires us constantly to keep producing more, consuming more in order to keep the economy growing, in order to pay off the debt. And it's kind of like there is no limits. There's no end point to it. It just go on essentially forever or until it collapses. And so if we reframed growth as like, let's just say we don't need economic growth in terms of just numbers on the chart, but what we want is growth in quality of life. I don't know how we would frame that in a way that would be like simple for people to kind of see it and visualize it. But I think that would be a far healthier society where that's what people are working towards. That's what it's that thing about show me the incentive and I'll show you the outcome. If the incentive somehow, the reward that you get in life is based upon how much you contribute to the increasing of quality of life for like the greater society, then that would be the motivating factor. And I think there'd be a lot more fulfillment in that, but there'd probably also a lot less unnecessary consumption. There'd still be consumption, exactly as we're discussing. Like we'd be like, okay, well, let's use some of this energy we've got to like put in these infrastructure that's going to help people in this way. But there'd be less people who are just getting up in the morning being like, oh, I need that thing. I need to click buy now, next day delivery, because it just kind of wouldn't be as relevant to them. They wouldn't, because the addiction, the system pushing the addiction upon them would be absent. So they would be more free to just kind of get up in the day and do something fulfilling.
And it's also just so interesting the way that the governments make certain addictions illegal and other addictions.
It's absolutely bizarre.
Enable it's bizarre. So like there is an addiction to buying next day delivery. I mean, why is that? Like, what is the it's so arbitrary, the line which they draw. There's like and I haven't really dove into this enough because it's so hard to understand economics. I'll be honest with you. It's really, you have to understand
It's
like
not by
economics to
accident.
understand how to debunk economics. But Steve Keen, the heterodox economist, who I follow as much as I can. And I haven't dove into this too much yet, but I've heard enough of him talk about it. And he talks about another metric, or another way of measuring fundamentally, which just acknowledges the fact that energy is not this kind of catalyst or byproduct of the system with which we live in, but is actually fundamental to it. And so if I'm remembering his approach correctly, it's like a country should be measured against how much of the available energy it converts into useful value for its people, if that makes sense. So if you're in a country with a lot of oil, your metric would be, the way you're measured is in how much of the energy of the oil do you translate into, I don't know exactly. I didn't quite understand this aspect of his argument, but like to do useful value for your people, because then you're not. Then it's just kind of making this energy equation like fundamental to the whole aspect of society, because he's recognizing, he made the kind of similar to what you said, which is like it's all about, we can't survive in life without energy. Like we can't, there's this really, I've forgotten, Roy Castleford, I can't remember his name. He's like a historian, but he talked about, in the hunter-gatherer age and the agrarian age, the equation they talk about is how many calories do you have to expend to get, and how many calories you get in return. And like before like industrialization, before all this stuff, being a farmer was horrible.
Yeah.
It was like a 4-to-1. It was like really hard, and you get a bad year and you're screwed. It was a lot of calories you had to expend to till the land. In fact, you would get better calories as a hunter gatherer, better ratio as a hunter gatherer.
Well, yeah, way better. Yeah, because you're effectively just walking.
Way better, yeah, yeah.
Which is very, very efficient.
Sitting down most of the day.
Yeah, actually, like digging land and so on is hugely exhausting.
I just think it's like, I wonder how much of this stuff. I know you want to tap into a topic of energy and how it really relates into this, and I think it does. I think it's yeah. I don't know.
Well, I guess there's
how does energy relate into this? Yeah.
I guess there's a couple of things on my mind in this regard. One is picking up on what you just said. I feel like energy is the means to the end, and just as money is the means to the end. Like, I think part of our fallacy with GDP is that we've made that the end, not the means. And then we're chasing that. So I think if we did this, if we said our GDP was a fallacy, let's now create some sort of energy metric. I think like energy, whether it's energy consumption or energy conversion efficiency or whatever it is that we come up with, somehow that would become the mean. That would be the end, not the means. Whereas if we flipped it and we said, okay, what if we had a series of metrics? It's not one metric, but there's like a health metric. So it's like basically rates of chronic disease as one potential metric. We had some sort of mental health metric. Like in Bhutan, they have gross national happiness. I don't know how they measure that, but as a concept, it's pretty cool. I know that governments would end up finding a way of designing the surveys to try and make sure, manipulate the way that people give their responses, so it makes it sound as if people are happier than they are. But fundamentally, if we could say well, what really matters to the quality of life for human beings, that is stuff that can be provided by society rather than some stuff you just got to deal with. It's your own kind of inner exploration to kind of figure out. But in terms of what society can provide,
well, governments can help facilitate that.
Governments can help facilitate
that.
Exactly, creating the space and the culture and facilities and so on for that. So I think if we got the metrics directly based upon human need, it would have to be very carefully designed. I think you just fundamentally end up with a healthier society, because of that thing of you're chasing the metric. We discussed this, I think, in the last episode about carbon. We're focused on that one measurement. But if we were measuring what really mattered to us as human beings, that would change things significantly. But then on the energy equation, it's kind of going it's a completely different line of thought, really. Is there an upper limit to this demand? So if, like, we're saying that, like, okay, we're like, when we increase the efficiency of technology, whether it's energy production or like the devices that consume energy, we are just lifting the limit of what's available to meet unmet demand. The question is there anywhere, like, and I know the question of like artificial demand that we've just discussed is part of this mix.
Yeah.
But like, is there ever going to be an upper limit to that unmet demand? And this sort of came to my mind a couple of years ago at the Green IO conference, where I gave a talk, and somebody asked me a question about something to do with energy consumption, and I jokingly just made some comment about, like, well, if we had 0 point energy, then we could stop worrying about it. And 0 point energy, you know, there's different perspectives on whether it's ever viable, yes or no, and if it's viable, does it already exist? And if it already exists, does it exist in human hands or non-human hands? So once you get down the rabbit hole of 0 point energy, it's like, you know, there's a lot of interesting stuff going on. But nevertheless, it's a great thought experiment to just say, well, let's just say hypothetically that it is possible and that humans could have it, regardless of whether we've got it now or we could invent it in the future. What if that was possible? What would happen if we get to the point where we've effectively developed an energy technology that is clean and effectively unlimited? So it's no longer the limiting factor for our consumption. And Gail Duez, who was hosting the talk that I gave at Green IO, when I made this comment, he sort of frowned and said, no, if we have 0 point energy, we'll have so much power in our hands, we will destroy everything. And I was like, oh, that's an interesting perspective. And I've been thinking about it a lot, like, over the last few years since then, because I half agree with him. And when I say I half agree with him, I half agree with him because I feel like it's that Las Vegas thing of, like, the final destination of the track. If we keep going down the track we're on, where do we end up? And it's like, well, if you kind of lifted the lid and just said, oh, well, like, you've got as much energy as you want, you'd still have this engine of GDP growth and companies needing to, like, push addiction to make people want to consume more. And then, but there just wouldn't be that, like, natural physical limit of, like, how much we can consume. But the other half of me is like, yeah, but that right there is the problem. And that's not I'm not convinced that's innately human. I think actually.
So what's not innately human? The desire to consume? That's foisted upon us.
Yeah, and you see this in, like, after the Second World War, for example. You have, like, all these factories that have, like, been developed in Europe and Britain and America to basically, like, be part of the war machine. Like, you know, this rapid increase in production and technology to fuel the war with equipment. And then the war ends and you've just got all these factories and people own the factories, right? And then they're like, holy shit, what am I going to do now? And part of that is, like, what is basically becomes the military industrial complex, which is a very dark part of society, which is where they need to keep pushing government, lobbying governments to, like, enter conflicts.
They're addicted
to war, exactly, because they have to keep those businesses running. But some of them, you know, turn their operations away from, like, war production to civilian production, but they need demand. They need to make people want to buy the things that they don't really need. And then you get the whole rise of, like, 20th century advertising and marketing techniques combined with, like, the new media that came in around the same time of, like, radio and television and so on, to make people desire these new, like, you know, amazing lifestyles that are going to be so much better. You're going to be so much happier if you just have the latest whirligig. And that's kind of like, that's the world we were born into. But the fact that they had to do that artificial push through, like, advertising and marketing in order to fill the demand of these factories after the war, to keep the production up, and keep the economy growing, makes me think that actually there was a natural limit. Like people that weren't looking to have all this stuff, but once they had the ideas seeded into their head that you'll be so much happier with it, that became what they wanted. Left to their own devices, they kind of just wanted to hang out with their friends and, have a probably, I don't know, but some sort of
No, I
simpler
think,
life.
yeah, and we're creatures I mean, addiction is it's very easy for us to be, and I kind of like, I don't know whether there's an actual technical definition of addiction, but I think a lot of what I do is I would classify it as addiction. But yeah, so there's the yeah, I kind of see what you're saying. So like it's like if sans the addiction, what would be our behavior with regards to consumption, and would there be an upper limit? I think also I'm reminded because people often talk about the light being one of the examples of like Jevons Paradox, as in like the cost of light goes down so much that just people used it more. I think I'd argue that it's very useful having light, considering we can't see without it. But it's also, I remember I read this a while ago. Somebody said, yeah, but there's an upper limit. I mean, yes, I could have my entire room right now completely with LED panels on every single surface, and I could be bathed in this like shining white light. But you know what? I have a lot of light in the house. I have a lot of light in the street, but I'm okay. I'm not sitting here thinking, you know what, I need more. Now, I haven't been advertised. Maybe the light industrial complex hasn't quite geared up to convincing us that we need to be bathed in, sunlight, for all this time. But yeah, I think there is, from that example alone, there is like an upper limit. Yes, it's high. It's high. We could survive with a lot less light than we have right now. Yes, I don't always turn off my lights at night. Sometimes I forget. So it's not, I don't panic about it. But there is an upper limit to it. But I think you're right. I think when it comes to the addiction, that's where it gets very, very iffy. Like if you had zero, and I think the whole lot to the argument the girl was saying we all destroy ourselves. I was thinking the other day. I was driving my car on the motorway, and I have such dark thoughts in my head all the time when I drive my car, and I'm like, it's just like it's so easy to just, we're driving. Imagine like 50 years ago, people seeing what we do these days. We are 70, 80, 90 miles an hour, like 70 miles an hour down the motorway. 70 miles an hour down the motorway. I don't know how heavy my car is, like a ton, 2 tons, I don't know. I'm like just barreling down. Like the amount of power that has versus what somebody like 50, 100 years ago had is like unbelievable. Are we killing each other with our cars? I don't think so. I was thinking like how like we've all as a society gotten really good at driving, which is kind of crazy because we're driving around these incredibly powerful things. We've all very quickly learned how to drive and kind of like flocks of birds not kill each other. Although yes, there are accidents. Of course, there's accidents all the time. But we've learned to harness that power and also not be destructive with it, at least not too much. So from the 0 point energy, from the argument, from that example that we seem to have been given a lot of power and we're all right with it, it indicates to me that if we were given flying cars or whatever else the next innovation, I don't know what it is, like we wouldn't like. We have there's a human. I'm not crashing my car into somebody else's car because I want to survive. I also I don't think it's as a human being. Why would I do that? Like, why would I want to hurt somebody for no reason? I think human beings have this. Inside
well, actually,
us.
and the car's a really interesting example because, like we've mentioned before, you and I both have Teslas, and when I got mine, there was definitely a joy in experiencing the energetic power of the beast. Right? It's like I'm not somebody who generally was like into fast cars or anything, but it's so profoundly different and kind of beyond like previous cars.
Any electric car.
Yeah,
is
exactly.
like-
It doesn't matter
yeah,
the brand.
any electric car. Yeah, I had another electric car. I had a very weak electric car before, and I was like, holy smokes, I feel like a
Yeah,
sports
exactly. And
a sports driver.
It's
Yeah,
fun.
it's
There's
crazy.
like a
Yeah,
genuine physical thrill that is coming from, there's something about, why do humans go on roller coasters? Like there's something in us that gets a thrill out of that kind of
yeah.
physical motion. But if I'm
Yeah.
being honest,
That's power.
like,
yeah.
I mean, some people might be addicted to it. I don't know whether you are or not, but like I've had the car for like many years now, and most of the time now I just drive it like a normal car. Like every now and then there's just something in me that's like, oh, like, and I think like there's no one around, the road seems safe, but there is a limiting factor of like, well, it seems safe, and I'm just kind of in the mood for like a bit of a physical thrill, and I'll enjoy what it has to offer. But I'm not driving around like a maniac the whole time because the car is capable of 0 to 60 in 4.5 seconds or whatever stupid time it does. It's like, I know there are people like that, but they do that in their Ford Fiesta. Not 4.5 seconds, but they will drive as fast as they can.
Yeah.
So I do think, there's an upper limit.
Do I?
Yeah. You drive around
There's
like
an
a
upper
maniac.
limit to my limiting factor is my wife, because if she's in the car, then I have to drive like very, very gently. My kids insist I drive faster. Most of the time it's on auto. I drive at whatever speed that the cars around me. But it's more like the statement that, I mean, so looking at what is the limiting factor from a car perspective, I've got one car because we need one car in our house. We both work at home. We don't have multiple cars. I don't drive around unless I have an actual need to drive.
You don't think
around.
electricity is cheaper than it used to?
I'll go for
well, electricity is more expensive.
I'm going to drive a little bit.
But if you had a cheap supply of it, like for example, free charging on the Tesla chargers, which I've got because I've got an old one. Yeah, but I don't think, you know what? I'm gonna go and like drive around all day because I can like get free electricity from the supercharger. Like,
no.
I don't really. Well, it's just not even really a factor. Like, if I have a choice on a journey I'm going to do anyway between a paid charger and a free one, I'll use the free one. But I don't drive more because of it.
Because it's
but
free.
That said,
because there's no unmet demand. There's no you haven't been. There's no need. There's no want, and there's no addiction.
Yeah.
Other people might be more addicted to driving 24/7. I don't know why there's other things.
The difference would be if I was in genuine poverty and I had to drive to get to work, and I struggled to make ends meet, then I would drive to work because I have to, and then I just wouldn't touch the car because I'm trying to save as much money on petrol as I can. But if then the car or the fuel became much, much cheaper, and it made me feel like I was no longer like stretched for money at the end of the month, I might be like, say to my family or my friends, hey, do you want to go out somewhere on Saturday in the car? Because I can afford the petrol.
But you've ruined it. You've ruined it now. You've got Jevons Paradox in action. How dare you? How dare you entertain your family?
Dare you entertain your family?
When you didn't have to.
Yeah. But there's a limit to that as well, right? Because you're not going to, you might go out at the weekend with your friends or your family, but there is a physical there's a limit to how much time you have and how much energy you have to want to be going out driving places in your car.
I think but even though you talked about 0 point energy, it kind of reminded me of, I read a book, The Grid, that talks about like the birth of the grid system in the US. It's a really fascinating book, Birth of Electricity. It's fascinating because I thought it's quite funny. There were loads of competing companies, and each company had their own voltage, and so depending on which company you had to have like a separate cable from that company into your house. So like the cities were like crisscrossed with loads of cables from loads of different companies, and until they standardized on the voltage and other things, like it was just a mess of like everybody doing whatever they wanted. It was nuts. But then so there's a fascinating story there. But one of the things they talked about in that book was like in nuclear in like 1950s. like early nuclear, it was seen as such an unbelievable. I mean, think it's similar to coal. Suddenly this nuclear thing came along, and amount of electricity they could get from such small, like, amount of whatever it was, nuclear material, was so stunning that a lot of like energy firms and nuclear firms were really the future thinking ones were really starting to think, well, hang on, how will the world end up if everybody was on nuclear? And they realized this point, they were all like going, do you know, we're actually gonna have to stop charging for electricity. Like the cost of electricity was going down so much with nuclear. They realized at some point they would just have to go, do you know what? The electricity's free. You're paying a subscription for the line rental. So they were basically, so that's why the grid was so important. They were like, all you're doing is paying like a Wi-Fi subscription. All you're doing is paying for like the line rental, but the electricity is free. Then all of a sudden, a lot of other energy firms came along and said, you know what, I don't like the sound of that. Don't like the sound of that. You're going to undercut us. And then, for decades and decades and decades, a lot of, green societies initiatives have seemingly been funded by a lot of oil and gas to kill nuclear. Nuclear, again, is like, would it be just the best solution to all of us? Because again, it's like essentially free electricity, maybe not unlimited electricity, maybe not the 0 point aspect of it, but just free electricity. And when you look at kind of like other things, like free electricity brings people out of poverty. Free electricity reduces significant carbon emissions in like poorer countries where they're forced to, not just carbon emissions, but also helps with biodiversity because they're then not forced to kind of like go into the woods and chop down more things to burn to keep them. So it's like if everybody just had like a portable nuclear, if you could go to every village and give every village a portable nuclear power generator, so many sustainability issues would just be resolved. Maybe 0 point energy is maybe there is a question about 0 point energy because if you did have unlimited energy, maybe you could create like a bomb or something. I suppose you could also create a bomb from a nuclear power generator.
Well, this is one of the big problems with nuclear, right? Is that there is a very dangerous side to it.
Yeah. No, but the technology is there and exists right now, and a lot of the nuclear power plants that are built today are not the kind of ones that blow up.
No, but there's danger in the fact that countries who have that technology can build nuclear weapons, as well as the fact that the waste
if I can just
has not been
counter
solved.
you on that one. Yeah. I counter you on that one because it's oftentimes thought of as like, but like the way you need to refine nuclear material to the point to make it into a weapon is vastly different to, you need to refine it to like 3% to make it useful in a nuclear reaction, but you need to refine it to 95% to get it useful in a bomb. And so you actually need to have like a vastly different equipment to refine nuclear material into bomb making material versus into the material for your nuclear power plants. So just because like somebody's got a nuclear power plant doesn't mean that nuclear power plant is generating the kind of material that you can use in a bomb. You actually do need to engineer vast kind of structures to engineer it. Yeah.
But it comes back to
I want to be a viral.
This opens up a really interesting angle because there is a question of the wisdom of humanity. And I think in a way, this whole conversation about rebound effect, Jevons Paradox and upper limits and so on is a question of wisdom. So for example, nuclear material could be used in a beneficial way, but it could also be used in a way that is fundamentally destructive.
Yeah.
Similarly, if it was ever developed.
Yeah.
But then it's also true of fossil fuels. Because everything. Because it's like, well, you could just say...
It has been used in fossil fuels. Bombs are made from explosive-y things. They're probably made from fossil fuels.
And exactly. Like the early non-nuclear, all even now, non-nuclear weapons, like missiles and things, they're all fossil fuel powered. But it's not just about weapons. It's also just about the consumption. That there is just a question of, can we handle the power in our hands? So when we're increasing the energy available to us, when we've got a small amount of energy available to us, there's a hard limit to how much damage we can do if we're stupid.
Yeah.
And it doesn't require...
Yeah. We've got bumper cars.
Exactly. Yeah. And it doesn't require all of us to be stupid. It just requires like a certain proportion of society to be reckless with the energy in their hands, because it makes us more powerful beings. Like I said earlier, like we're very physically weak in comparison to the technology we have available now. So every kilowatt hour of energy that we have available to us is something that we could use to help somebody and do something good, even like environmentally good. Like there might be like environmental projects that just need energy in order to accomplish them, or it could be used to destroy something. And I think in a way, like the whole environmental problem and this tension between social benefit and environmental issues is this tension between kind of wisdom and what's the opposite of wisdom? Fallacy.
Don't know. Lack of foolishness. Yeah.
Some of that is like artificially driven because we grow up in a culture that shapes us. We don't choose where we're born or the culture we're born into. Like we're just born into it, and then that makes us think in a certain way and behave in a certain way. And we might try and like become aware of it and try and undo some of it as we get older, but that's kind of our starting point. But I think if we're worried about environmental problems, in a way what we're saying is we're worried that we're not wise enough yet as a society to actually handle the technology and the resources we have available. Because if we were wise enough, we'd be like, yeah, we've got fossil fuels. We'll use them for things that are like really beneficial. And we've got nuclear. We'll use it for things really beneficial. But we're not going to blow each other up. And we're not going to just like chop down forests so that we can make stupid little things that nobody needs.
Isn't it linked to when you say are we wise enough? I think the problem is more that, again, we're going back to the concentration of power, that a few people are the people who are in charge wise enough? Why are they in charge? Do they have the mechanisms? I mean, why do we have a world in which just a few people have the ability to destroy the planet?
Well, this goes back to power.
It's argued that,
because it's energetic power combined with the, like I have the power to control the car in my driveway, and that has a certain amount of power. I've got the power to switch on the lights in my house. But I don't have the power to press a button and launch a nuclear weapon. Or I don't have the power to launch a global marketing campaign to make people want to buy things that they don't need. So, so there's like the scale of like how much of that energetic power is in any one person's hands, and are they wise enough to handle that crazy amount of power?
And again, I go back to that. My whole world is like if we just had the ability, if you had a true democratic system, I think we would all. I think a couple of things, interesting things would happen. We would slow down because things just get a lot slower. You won't be able to like. AI is coming along. Oh, we need to move fast. Nah, it's going to take us 2 years to get consensus on this one issue, and we're not going to adopt it until we do. So we'll just slow everything down. It would slow everything down. And it would also, I think, make, again, the decisions I'd be more willing to go behind. But am I willing to go behind a decision just because some people elected as a leader, decided, for whatever reason, that's their approach. But the thing I went back to Jevons again. I was thinking because it was just bring it back to Jevons because this is a Jevons paradox. Like going back to economics and what Jevons was actually trying to do when he was trying to like propose all these theories and trying to propose, Jevons paradox and trying to propose all this stuff is what economics were trying, what economists of the 1800s the question they're trying to answer is a very simple question. What makes some countries more powerful than other countries? That was their only question. They didn't know in the 1800s. They didn't know, like, is it having a big army? Well, having a big army also ends up costing you a lot of money, and it doesn't help with your trade. It doesn't help you with this. So, is it having a big army? Is it having a strong trade? Well, having a strong trade but not having a big army, does that mean that like you're just going to get trounced over? So they're really trying to like this only question like is it having just fundamentally a strong monarch with like a strong nobility? Is having a strong aristocratic class of barons, is that what's needed to make a country strong? That's all they were trying to like figure out is what makes a country strong. And we've landed in a world where how governments measure the strength of a country is how many of the people in their country they can get addicted to buying things. And if more people in your country can get addicted to buying things, you therefore have a stronger country. And that's not true. And now we're exploring ideas of like, well, let's give people everything that they need, access to free energy. And you and me are also worried about, well, will they screw things up if they were given the powers? Because, you know, do we trust the people or do we trust like the government? But really, I think fundamentally the question, and I think that's again, the question is what makes a country strong? What makes a country strong? And I if I think to myself, I think everybody having access to, as you've mentioned before, like having their needs met, you know, having their wants met, having access to all the energy that they need for free would seem to be a pretty good argument. This is one of the reasons for like having, if you think about like what is economics is answering the question what makes a country strong. You know, having a really good education system is front and foremost, because then having like a whole bunch of people in your country who are well educated, who know what's going on, who are functioning members of society is really important. Having really strong social programs and why am I pointing down? I'm pointing out that's because my kid's nursery is like having nursery and kids paid for. It's related over there. But like having like a good, you know, right next to cost a fortune to have kids and put them in school, and people then have to like choose, do I have a job or do I look after my kids because it's gonna cost me the same. So like having like a good system like that then allows people to like, okay, good, I'll put my kids with the nursery, now I'll go back and be a functioning member of society. So like that was in Jevon's brain.
Yeah.
That's what he was thinking.
Yeah.
He wasn't thinking. He was thinking what makes a country. That's how he was worried about. We're going to run out of coal because coal makes Britain strong.
And they had a similar thing in Germany
that was
they were worried they were going to run out of wood, and so the whole like forestry management, the science of forestry management developed in Germany because that was the backbone of their economy at the time. Back in, I can't remember if it was like 1700s or early 1800s. And so they did a similar thing where it was like, okay, we need to figure out how we're going to basically ensure that we've got enough wood because that's what makes our country strong. There's a few things I'd pick up on. One is, how are we defining strong?
Yeah, they didn't know. They weren't trying to. They didn't know.
What is strength? Is strength? I don't know. Is it material riches for everybody? Is it happiness and health for everybody? I'd say that. Is it dominance over people in other countries? Is it having an elite class who have everything they want? I don't know. There's many ways that, like, depending on who you are and what seat you sit in, you could frame strength of a country.
Yeah.
But then equally, like what you were saying about like free nursery, it means you can go and be a functioning member of society. But that's kind of working on the assumption that being a functioning member of society means going to do a job, right?
Yeah, so you can earn more money to buy more things,
rather than being a functioning member of society being like, well, we've got this technology that's basically now like growing our food and providing, like, pumping water to our houses and supplying us with energy. So I'm gonna hang out with my kids and teach them things. That would be like an amazing function in society, right?
Yeah. Like we've lost the, and I agree with that. Like I think it's quite reasonable. Like growing up, if you think about it, like growing up the next generation to be as strong as they possibly can, and that also means being like emotionally resilient, which also means, you know, having like people at home and playing around with other you know, having that is important. But that's not where we've landed at all. We've landed in this whole very ugly. That's why I seem to, through all of our conversations, not be blaming companies as much as I seem to be blaming governments. I seem to be blaming governments because I kind of like expect companies and people to do whatever. Somebody was saying the other day, like water flows just down. It's wherever the water flows, it flows. So like it's just they're just flowing wherever the water flows, but it's the governments that are responsible for like crafting the causeways and making the water flow in the areas and understanding that's where water flows and driving in the direction it needs to go. And I feel we've been failed. Everybody, I can't think of a single government in the world which hasn't been failing its people.
Yeah. No, I agree. I agree with that latter point about failing governments.
Yeah.
But I also question like whether it is governments. I feel like there's this sort of it's the thing you talk about like the spectrum of power and the direction of travel of power. And if you follow the flow of power, there must be a center of power somewhere. And I don't think any of us know where it is. I genuinely don't. Like if you look at the companies and you think, oh yeah, they're so powerful and it must be their fault. But then they're in this system where like that's what drives them to do the things they do. And then you say, oh, it's the governments. And you look at them and it's like, honestly, they're like, I think most career politicians, a bunch of idiots who are basically doing what furthers their careers and their own kind of egos and status. And they're driven by these forces of lobbyists, which are the corporations again, right? Or like wealthy people and corporations, and the civil service and maybe some other forces. But they're basically kind of these weird puppet people who are like being pulled around by these other forces. And then you're like, well, okay, well, for one of them is like the corporations and the rich people. We've kind of already got them over there, but they're somehow being driven by the system, so they're not the system. So then, maybe it's like the civil service, and then you get into this whole thing about like the deep state, and like, is it the deep state? It's like, well, who's that? Like, like who is that? Like, it's the CIA. Like, but who's that? Like, there's lots of normal. Like, I'm not gonna say normal. There's lots of like just people who work in the CIA or civil service or whatever, and they just go to work, they do their job, they go home. They're not the center of power. They're also in a system that does what it does for some reasons that they probably are unaware of. Then people say, it's the bankers. It's the bankers. And maybe it is, I don't know. But if you dig into that, and like, but there's lots of bankers and lots of different banks, and most of them are just people who go to work every day and they're in an economic system where like that's what banks do because that's the way the economic system is, and it kind of evolves. And then the question is, there's kind of two parallel questions. One, where's the center of power? Because it's very, very hard to see, and wherever I look, I always end up thinking like, I'm not sure it's there. But also, like the kind of the flip question is there a center of power, or have we somehow just organically evolved? Like one thing led to another. And this is just the system that emerged from billions of humans over thousands and thousands of years doing what they did every day. And it's in a way, it's kind of just the evolution of humanity that created this system. And then the question is, well, if that's the case and there is no center of power, then what are we trying to solve? Because we're not the center of power. I'm not, you're not. Nobody in the sustainability community that I've met is the center of power. Probably nowhere even close to it.
Yeah. No.
So maybe what we're trying to, then you come back to like, well, maybe if it is just the evolution of humanity just ended up here, then you're back to the thing of like, well, maybe I just need to live my life as being what I think is the best human I can be, and contribute to the evolution in a direction that I think is positive, because I don't know.
Well, I think you touched basically upon the issues or the thoughts you've basically touched upon every sector of our society there. So there is like the set of people who think that there is some centralized force, some centralized power. And I can find that that's very, not even intoxicating, it would bring me a sense of relief to believe that. True relief, because then I'd be like, okay, that's where I can focus my attention to, and
you can do something with that.
That's what makes it. You can do something with that, and it's very enticing to kind of think that. It's very liberating to think, okay, let's just call it Trump. If I just think Trump's the most evil person in the world, as long as we get rid of Trump, everything's going to be fine. And I think that's the problem with that line of thinking, because if it's not true, and I don't believe it is true, what we constantly do is put our attention into individuals, thinking if we get rid of this or even entities, if we get rid of this individual or entity, they're the problem. They're the central power. They're the thing coordinated. They're the puppet masters. And if you get rid of them, then everything would resolve. I personally don't subscribe to that. I think the reason you can't find them is it's not there, and it's actually the second thing you mentioned, which is just it's organically. It's just we landed here. Somebody layered this one thing on, and then someone said, "Oh, that thing's layered there. I'll just layer this thing on here. It seems to work. I got a Lego piece that snaps in. I'll snap in this Lego piece." Everybody's just kind of like everybody's just living life on this planet, and because we invent these things called GDP and we invent this thing called neoclassical economics, we just kind of like slot in to these things that are inventions, and they don't need to be true. All that needs to be is that enough people believe in it, and then they follow the rules that are neoclassical economics. And then if people follow the rules of neoclassical economics, I can make money out of that, and I can become more powerful. That's all that needs to happen. But I disagree with your final statement, which is that, if that's the case, then what is the thing that you need to do? Well, you just live your life better. I think we do what we're doing on right now, which is just the only thing. It's just an idea. That's why we call it. It's a systemic. The problem is systemic because the problem is just this system that we've landed in. But the belief that the only way we can't really impact this system is, I think untrue. I think we can, but I think it's probably very different to how people would imagine we would change it. Like the way you're exploring with your book of just like helping people to see a different way is almost the only thing that we need to do. Like what the heterodox economists are doing is life saving for the world, because all they're doing is helping people to understand, listen, this economic model is not actually true. And this is why it's not actually true. You're kind of just living this lie. That by itself is so. That's how you change the system.
By shattering the illusion that we are governed by. That we're not governed by the government or by the bankers or whoever it is. We're governed by the illusion that we're all collectively subscribing to and reinforcing. And if we shatter it, then we see other possibilities, and maybe we then, as a swarm, right, sort of. Suddenly shoot off over there to some new place that is part of our evolution, but we went there because we saw a new way.
So the solution, that's why the solution is just an idea.
I love
That's it. And if we get enough people to subscribe to the idea, I think we can shatter the illusion. And that's it.
Great. I think that's a good time to wrap up.
Yeah, it's good. It's a good time to wrap up. It's I like this. Also, we're going to run out of time on the free talk.